where you are is where you are meant to be. You are leading in ways that is powerful, it's inspirational, and needed in healthcare and in this world, and that you are capable and confident. It's about growth, and it's about wanting to make positive impact and change. And I think you can see those people. You can see those silent leaders every day. If you just stop and just think and just look around you, I'm sure you'll catch those people.
Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast, where we're all about helping healthcare professionals like you create positive change at work, at home, and everywhere in between.
So nobody ever pulled Klaus aside and said, "Hey, you're a leader." No title, no ceremony, no corner office. But every single shift, he has been making decisions that change the trajectory of someone's day. And sometimes it's their life. And he didn't even see it. If you've ever felt like leadership is something that happens over there in the C-suite or behind a closed door, this conversation might change that for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Transforming Healthcare Coaching Podcast. And I'm Klaus. I'm a PA that practices in emergency medicine and a coach with Transforming Healthcare Coaching. And today I am being interviewed by Gillian Faith. And Gillian, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience really quick? And then why don't we get into this beautiful topic of silent leadership?
Yeah, so my background's in rehabilitation services, both the UK and the US, and also in management and executive leadership coaching, and now team coaching as well. So happy to be here today with you, Klaus. And I'm curious, can you take us back to a moment early in your career where you were clearly leading, but if someone had actually called you a leader, you may have questioned them and wondered what that was really about?
Yeah. Over the past few years, Jillian, I think we've explored this concept of leadership so deeply within our clients, within ourselves. And for the longest time, I never resonated with this title of leadership or leader, and always attributed that to a title or position that somebody may have. And over the few years, I've been diving into this reflection of we are leading in so many capacities, even though we may not have that leadership title. Leaders with titles are extremely important. We need them. But we also have to remind ourselves that there are people leading on the floors, leading patients' lives, leading their own lives when we're not even aware of it, and making so many positive differences in healthcare. So I would have laughed if somebody had told me you're a leader a few years ago, being like, what are you talking about? I'm just a practicing clinician on the floor, working with the team and with patients.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I think that happens every day in healthcare. People are just going about their work, and it's very important work, and not really thinking about the term leader. And like you're saying, if we were to call these people leaders, they may question, am I really a leader? And they are leading themselves every day and probably silently leading teams and leading families as they go about their everyday work.
Yeah. And I never actually researched the term silent leadership. It was just something that came very resonating to me when kind of planning a podcast episode to talk about something that I think is so important. I think you just said it, it's that word silent. It's not needing the recognition oftentimes, or it maybe wanting the recognition is just maybe not received. But it's exactly what you say, is right. Sometimes our leaders are not aware. When I say leaders here, I'm talking about specific title or position that we are leading in so many different ways. We are going out there to talk to patient families, giving them updates, discussing appropriate treatment plans. When a sick patient comes in, acting quickly to making sure that they're getting the best care and appropriate treatment right at that moment, to guiding our other team members in these critical situations. I think a good example of this is when we call it timeout, when all internet goes down, EMR goes down, and we have to kind of write our notes and still practice care with not the same resources that we normally have. And in those moments, there's so many times of silent leadership. The person who's writing the patient's name on a label instead of like using a computer to print it out, to putting patients' names on a board or their complaints so that things are organized. So I think this word silent is so resonating because there's leadership that is happening every day on the floors, in the clinics that we don't speak about.
Right. And if you think about some of the core strengths of powerful or impactful leaders, trust and respect are integral to being a good leader. And I imagine most of the time, if not all of the time, families and other team members are trusting and respecting you as you go about your clinical duties.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think trust is a huge thing, and as leaders with titles, we are constantly giving trust to our team members to lead when we're not there.
Right. And you mentioned titles. And so, clinical manager, clinical leader, titles or no titles. How do you think not having a title makes somebody show up differently?
Well, that's a great question. I think it changes the focus of your role, whether you're in healthcare. And I think when you don't, per se, have that leadership title, you're not acting in ways for recognition. You're doing it because you authentically, truly care about what you're doing. Because you could also say, that's not my role. That's not my job. That's not my duties. I don't need to do that. And I think as a leader, oftentimes you have to show your results. You have to show what your leadership is doing for your departments and your teams and your employees for the higher ups in organizations. But when you're silent, per se, not with your technical duties, it's done for a completely different reason.
And we can probably all think of people in teams that we currently work with or teams that we've worked with in other situations where you can put a name to that image that you just described. The silent leader that just goes about doing their job but doesn't have the title.
Yeah, and I think about that all the time when I'm working in the emergency room or the urgent care, one of the nurses, and, giving the patient education, answering questions that sometimes it's just so much easier to say, "Can you just go into the room, Klaus, and just talk to them?" But they know the answers to those questions. Or when critical situations come up, right? They're acting on that on their own capabilities and within their own scope and not relying on somebody else to do it. You might be the charge nurse, you might this, but it's all about communication. It's about growth and it's about wanting to make positive impact and change. And I think you can see those people. You can see those silent leaders every day. If you just stop and just think and just look and look around you, I'm sure you'll catch those people and how they are a pleasure to work with oftentimes.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, what do you think the traits are of these silent leaders? What do you think makes them successful in their positions? And you've just talked about some of them, but can you elaborate on any of those?
Well, I think they bring positive energy. Let's start with that. It may be tough for them sometimes when there's maybe 40 people in the waiting room or you guys are falling behind, whatever it may be, disaster left or right's coming through, but they're not there saying, "Oh, I hate my job. There's so much problem." They're working on solutions. They're navigating, they're communicating, and they're listening too. When you speak up and say, "I need help with something," they're there. They are the ones that you can call to when things are not maybe going right. And sometimes you don't even need to call on them. You just see them. You just see them. They're just doing. They're constantly doing. I think that's probably what I would say. They're constantly doing. It may be a slow day, slow department, but they are actively doing stuff to still keep things prepared for maybe worse scenarios. But they are constantly doing something that says, we want to make sure we're providing the best patient care. And they're doing stuff to say, I want to make sure my team's successful and that we're doing the right things.
Right. Because one of the functions of a leader is to help all their direct reports or their team to rise up and become leaders as well. When you think about leadership presence, what comes up for you?
So when we talk about silent leadership, I think where sometimes the differences show up, the silent leader may not resonate with that leadership title, as we talked about, or that leadership resonance. And so they may not exhibit the same professionalism that you may see in somebody who wears a leadership title. They may not be dressed in the suit or dressed in the nice clothes. They might have hair from their dogs on their scrubs. They may still be very sarcastic and playful in the workplace that sometimes you don't always see with those who hold leadership titles, but they are still the people that you can count on and are there in these moments of crisis that can handle these situations and communicate and really are somebody that I look up to or I see, like I said, doing very important work that I think those with leadership titles really recognize that they're needed on every day when they're not there.
Yeah, and as you say that, what's coming up for me again is the trust and the respect. So whether you have the title, whether you're wearing the suit or not, if you can gain the trust and respect of others, it will always put you in a leadership position, whether you realize it or not.
And these are talking points, as you just mentioned, that these are moments where people feel stuck in their positions. They feel like, oh, I'm going nowhere. I'm just a nurse. I'm just a PA. I'm just a physician. But you're so much more when you start to maybe resonate with some of the silent leadership, or if you want a true leadership title, these are moments that you can speak to. This is what I did. Come with confidence, you know? You're the one that did this. This is what you do every day when you go to work. And that speaks volume. That's what leaders need is that ability to act quickly, have that presence we just spoke about, have those qualities. Now it's just the title and a few other aspects.
So if we notice there's somebody on our team that is a natural leader but doesn't have the title, how can we help them gain some awareness or perhaps think about what the next step in their career could be?
Well, that's a great question. As somebody who's still practicing full time as a PA in the emergency room and urgent care, one thing that I think I could do would be to ask them, how are you in your role? How much of leadership resonates with you? I think it's curious because I've done the reflective work in order to kind of have this awareness and understanding, but I don't know if many people have. And this is a good waking up point that I've never really asked some of my colleagues how much they resonate with leadership. But I think with that question in mind, that might be something that triggers them or motivates them to say, hey, maybe there is something else more for me. I think oftentimes we're just not aware of how we're showing up every day and that other people see you as a leader. And I think if you or somebody who's working in healthcare who either embodies this silent leadership or sees this silent leadership in your day to day, one thing I always do is I recognize people for the work that they do. From the charge nurse to the floor nurse to the physician, I appreciate different moments and situations. And I think appreciation and validation and acknowledgement go a long way. That's one way to kind of do it. But I think the next step would be, as I just mentioned, is how much do you resonate with leadership? Because in my eyes, you're leading in such capacity that is such a great role model for other people. How interested would you be to advance in your career maybe and lead others from a leadership title that could make some great difference?
Right. And I think sometimes it's confidence, isn't it? Somebody may have the skills, but they just may not have the confidence in themselves to actually take the jump to the next level. So, any thoughts on how people who may have silent leadership going on can help grow confidence if it's something that they need?
Working with a coach is really helpful because these are moments where you get to speak to somebody about where you are currently and where you want to be. And it may be very messy and hazy, and so a concept of being a leader may not even be something that's on your mind. But when you start to unravel the way that you show up every day on your job, that concept might come to fruition. And then to unpack that even further, to say, it's that confidence you just mentioned. How can you be more confident in this silent leadership that you embody? Or how much of this leadership do you not want to be silent anymore? How do we step out of the silence? Probably a question I could ask in a future coaching relationship is how can you step out of the silence here and allow that to unravel in somebody? Because again, it is completely unique for everybody how to develop confidence. But as coaches, we love to believe that everything starts with awareness. And if you're aware that you are leading, maybe silently, not silently, that's the first step to start to make progress.
So I'm curious, Klaus, you went through coach training. So what difference did that make to you in terms of how you view yourself as a leader?
When I went to coach training, it was more so actually just for me to free myself from some symptoms of burnout that I thought I was experiencing and likely was experiencing. And as I had experience with a coach in my PA education, and never was intended to create a career out of this and to use the coaching skills on with other healthcare professionals and leaders. But I think what I've gained from this experience of being coached and working with others as a coach and going through coach training was that reflection piece is huge. To really look inside, to question yourself, on how you show up every day and who you want to be, and seeing things from different lenses. I think it's the hardest part from all of us is we see ourselves as we show up every day, but sometimes we have to step back and start to see things from other people's side. When I go into a patient encounter, oftentimes nowadays I try and see things from the nurse. How does the nurse view this? How does the nurse view me? Am I confident? How does the patient see me? Do they see me confident in my role? And I think when I start to see things from the way other people could see me, it does shape a little bit about how I can future approach certain things and how I can grow and develop. I think the biggest thing is that you have to be in a growth mindset, saying that you want to grow, not change who you are, but just live to your fullest potential and or maybe grow into somebody that you're interested in being. We all have different visions of who we envision us to be tomorrow or in the future. We just have to really start to take those micro steps towards them.
Yeah, I love what you say about reflection, having the awareness and then being able to reflect on what's working or what have you learned about yourself and how do other people view what you do.
Yeah. If I can add on that, I think reflection is hard. I'm going to be honest with you. It comes off very cliche when we talk about reflection. Sit down on your journal every night. And these are great things. I'm not going to put fire to something that doesn't work. It works to reflect. But some people are not writers or time's a big thing. And so this is something that works for me even is to talk out loud with somebody. That's my reflection. Talking out loud to somebody who's unbiased, who's able just to hear me and just reflect back to me my own words. I mean, that's reflection, I think, on drugs because it's somebody else who's saying things back to you that you maybe are just not hearing yourself say. I think that's a plug for my reflection is having somebody you can speak to is always helpful, whether it be a therapist, a coach, a friend, a family member is huge.
Yeah. And I think reflection comes up for me in a couple different ways. On the drive home after a shift, we can be reflecting on what happened, what lessons we learned. If we had to do something over again, would we have done it differently? And then there's the reflection that you're talking about in a coaching session where it's actually very, very powerful for a coach to reflect back what they're hearing. Because sometimes we tell ourselves stories about ourselves because that's what feels good, but it's not necessarily always true. And I've experienced that personally. So I think reflection is very, very powerful. And so we're talking about coaching, but there's lots of mentoring programs out there and peer mentors and things like that in the hospital systems. So can you talk about what is different between coaching and mentoring?
What's different is mentorship oftentimes is shedding advice based off of your own experience. So I'm a mentor oftentimes to a lot of PA students. And a lot of times the questions that they're asking me are things that I've experienced personally and that I could shed advice to. Though as a coach, I can now lean into several different techniques to really help them come up to those answers themselves without having me telling them what it is that I did. But a lot of times those peer-to-peers, I think, oftentimes are more so used as shedding light to different experiences and different ways of thinking as a result of their own journey. Whereas coaching is really, though, as a PA, when you come to talk to me, I'm not shedding my PA background on you. I am listening who understands your terminology, can resonate with your language and your experiences. And if it's beautiful in essence where it's like, I don't have to explain to you that I'm coming home from my drive work and it's eating me away about certain patient cases. I get it. And so what is it that you need right now from me? How can I support you? So I would say that's probably the biggest difference that I could speak to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. And if you could think back to a situation, a clinical situation where you had to just get through the shift and you weren't necessarily thinking of yourself as a leader, So if you could go back, Klaus, and talk to the version of yourself who didn't feel like a leader, the one who was just trying to get through a shift, what would you tell him?
I would say it's okay for you not to have that awareness. Let's start with that. And I think that acknowledgement and that validation is huge. I would say where you are is where you are meant to be, number one, and that you are leading in ways that is powerful, it's inspirational and needed in healthcare and in this world, and that you are capable and confident and you are a leader. I think it's shouting that almost. You are a leader. And I think it would have taken some time to grasp onto that and feel the definition. But I think that would probably have been my first step would be to really feel and embody that. And I remember back to myself back then, it was uncomfortable. And I think that vulnerability and uncomfort was important. And it's only natural in order to really release the inner leader that you are.
And whether you're a silent leader or a leader with a title, we don't always have all the answers. I think you would probably agree with that. So having the psychological safety on teams to be able to speak up and say, I don't know the answer to this, or can somebody please help me with that? I think that's very important. And I think psychological safety is something right now that many leaders are aware of. And I know that I've worked with some leaders who are trying to create more psychologically safe teams so that people can speak up without fear of being, made to think that they're not worth the position or they don't have the potential. So do you have any other thoughts on psychological safety and how it might show up for somebody that is rising up in leadership?
Yeah, I think you just said it. I think it's very important from mm, those with the leadership title to really foster an environment for that psychological safety, to be able to come speak to them about anything, because a lot of people will keep things in or they won't say things out loud. And this actually shows up on clinical situations all the time, afraid to reach out to your attending or the provider about a certain thing because that question might feel stupid. But I always tell the people I work with, there's no such thing as a stupid question. If it's something that's on your mind, it's on your mind for a reason. Say it out loud because you don't want to make a mistake. You have people's lives in your hands. So come forward with it. And then next time you may not feel the need to ask that again. Who knows? But I think it comes from embodiment from the higher ups first. And so that it trickles down into your silent leaders, your individuals, and your teams.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So given that you've embraced your leadership while you're working in your clinical situation, what does thriving look like for you now that you have this awareness?
Well, I think for me, it looks like showing up to my work, knowing that what I am doing is important, and personally speaking, not needing the validation that sometimes I think with silent leadership, if you don't have this underlying awareness is that that's what you're doing. You may be seeking acknowledgement and validation for the things that you do. And for me, it's I know why I'm doing it, and it's for me, it's for my patients, it's for my teams, and that feels good to me. So for me now, showing up to a shift with this understanding that I'm a leader, it makes me more confident. It makes me more confident and I'm a little bit more positive at work. I'm not as drawn into some of these challenges and catabolic energy that sometimes can ensue in a healthcare environment and team. And I'm able to better embody more positive energy, more growth mindset. I find that to be toxic in a good way. Toxic in a way that people are saying, hey, I'm very interested in that. I want to be happier in my career. And so I think as coaches, when we were first started working all together, Lily and I are still practicing full time. We try and show up in these ways every day so that we can start to help healthcare one person at a time by us being that role model.
Yeah, and I love what you say about lifting other people up because I always think it can just take one person on a team to drag the whole team down if they show up with a not positive energy. But it also can take one people to lift a whole team or to lift individual members of a team. And I think that's really wonderful what you say about trying to show up every day with that mindset. And you've mentioned positive energy, growth mindset, and all really good things. But if we can look through that lens, because how we view the world and view our situation really changes the thought processes that go on in our mind
Yeah.
and can really impact the work that we do every day.
Yeah, totally agree. And I will say it's challenging sometimes, but it is well worth it. And the journey took a while and it's still part of my journey. And I always encourage those who are interested to step out of challenge mode into solution mode to really take that time for yourself. So thank you, Gillian, for letting me speak to silent leadership and something that's become much more important for me over the past few years.
Yes, so I'm curious as we come to the end of this, what would you like listeners to walk away from this conversation we've had today?
I think it would be to start to observe yourself and observe your team members and to see where you may see some silent leadership and see if that resonates with you. And what does that awareness do for you? Does it make you want to become a leader with a title? Does it make you want to be more fulfilled at work? Does it make you cringe? Be okay with whatever comes up and shows up for you. And here at Transforming Healthcare Coaching, we always want to be supportive of you and hear what your thoughts are with it. So leave us a comment, reach out to us, book a free discovery call if a coaching journey sounds important for you. And we'd love to hear more. So thank you, Gillian. And again, if anything resonated with you guys today, please subscribe, send us a comment. We really appreciate that. It gives us motivation to create more episodes that are completely resonating to you. So thank you.
Thank you, Klaus.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and share with a colleague who would benefit. Together, we can transform healthcare one person at a time. Find us anywhere you find your podcasts. Ready to take your healthcare leadership journey to the next level? Book a discovery call free at transforminghealthcarecoaching.com to explore our personalized coaching packages designed specifically for healthcare professionals like you.